Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Attributed, a podcast hosted by Dreamdata. You can find this and other episodes on everything B2B marketing on any platform where you get your podcasts. My name is Andrea Coloma, and today's session is on planning and budgeting for B2B marketing success in 2026. To help us through this session, I'm happy to welcome two experts who've lived through the complexity of planning cycles, go-to-market alignment, and just the realities of executing against extremely ambitious targets. I'm joined today by Natasha Davidson, CMO at LearnLight, and Jennifer Day, Head of Marketing at Pigment. So, Jennifer, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi. Thank you for having me today. My name's Jen Day. I'm the CMO of Pigment. And Pigment is an AI-first planning and performance management platform. We make it easy for organizations to plan, model, and understand their business so that they can act on that and make smarter decisions.
Thank you so much. How about you, Natasha?
Hi, Andrea. Hi, everyone. Hello, I'm coming to you live from Web Summit here in Lisbon, Portugal. So I apologize in advance for any background noise you hear. I will definitely keep my microphone muted and my comments as brief as possible. I'm Natasha Davidson. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of LearnLight. LearnLight is a communication skills training company. We help companies improve collaboration, performance, and impact through communication skills training. We use an AI-powered platform plus live human trainers to help employees in the areas of business language, intercultural skills, and interpersonal skills. Our mission is building great communicators for the global workforce. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining. So, starting, I feel like straight off the bat, the only question that makes sense is, how do you approach annual planning and budgeting? Easy question. Jennifer, you can go.
Sure, I'll start. We're in the thick of it right now, so it's top of mind. I think when I was asked to participate, I was like, sure, yes, I'm going through the cycle right now. Let's discuss it. Let's share our pains and our ways that we're approaching it as we're in this very transformational period of things changing so rapidly. But for me, it's really, you've got to make sure you've got all the business inputs first to be able to make sure that anything that you're doing from a marketing perspective is definitely aligned to the business, especially your go-to-market team. So for myself, like going through the exercise, it's understanding what are our pipeline and our ARR targets. Are there any things that have changed? Or are we thinking about things differently from a business perspective as far as the sources in order to hit those targets? So really, what am I accountable for? And making sure that I understand whether or not the marketing contribution that I'm planning for is going to help us ultimately get to the number that we need to get to as an overall company. The other input that's really important is the product roadmap, really understanding what is on the roadmap, if there's any new products or capabilities or partnerships or new ICPs that we're looking to pursue with new capabilities, going in eyes wide open, really understanding that. And then finally, are there any other strategic company initiatives that would require marketing support? So whether that's more community building, thought leadership, a narrative that we really want to make sure that we're owning in the market, making sure that all of those inputs are really clear before I start to go on that budgeting and planning journey with my team.
So there's a lot of groundwork to cover on first of all, what's happening? Where we're going, how do we want to get there before we can start aligning numbers to the different line items. How about you, Natasha? Is it similar? Do you have a different approach or maybe something that you can add on to that?
It's very similar to what Jen has described. So we are working in partnership with nearly all of the functions in the company. And for us, marketing planning starts as part of and on the back of the company strategy planning process. And so we have just completed our strategy planning throughout the summer, actually. where marketing was right in the midst of those discussions. And then, as Jen has talked about, understanding where is the company going? Are there new products? How has the roadmap changed? Even redefining or reaffirming, rather, our ideal customer profile. Do we know who we're really going after, who we need to get in front of? Because all of that has a direct impact on the quality of the leads that come in, the ability for us to contribute to pipeline, and obviously then influence contributions to revenue.
So it sounds like you need, I know this as a product marketer, you need a solid understanding who is our ICP and how am I going to support that on the marketing side in collaboration with the other functions that are also looking to gain that ICP business and attention. I wonder, so those are your personal approaches. They seem pretty aligned. I wonder if you've also have seen or can give me an example in your experience of how planning in marketing maybe is changing or if it's changing at all?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in here. Yeah, what I've noticed, and I've been a B2B marketer for over 25 years, and I think we've gone away from the annual plan. So you start with the annual plan and directionally know what you're going to achieve. But things change and things are changing so rapidly that there also is a H1 plan. And then as you get closer to H2, a replan. And I don't like to use the word replan because it seems like maybe your plan was wrong to begin with, but you're definitely the pace of change that is happening. It behooves us to believe that we can create an annual plan and just execute that across 12 months. So really the shift is moving from a directionally, what is the annual plan, then going deeper on that H1, going even deeper on the Q1, getting it really tight, and then coming into the quarters and making sure that you're making those adjustments that are needed. But definitely we do have that pause before going into the second half to see if there is anything that is fundamentally shifted that we need to now readjust. So I think just the pace of business now is really requiring that flexibility.
Completely. I really like what you said, Jen, about Q1. I often tell my teams that, yes, we need to have some ideas, some milestones, key goalposts that we're aiming for over the course of a year. But specificity in Q1 is super important, and especially where companies may be working off of a calendar year as their fiscal year. Getting a fast start and a really strong start in Q1 is so important. So in the planning process, having as clear a Q1 plan as you can, then you want to have a very clear H1. And I really like the point about doing a mini reset, if you will, taking a pause before you enter H2. We do the same thing here as well.
I have a lot of questions about sort of flexibility and budgets later on. What I'm understanding is that yes, it's good to plan. It's good to have this like idea of what's coming in the year forward, but the thing that is closest to us right now is Q1, so that has to be like sharp, clean, and clear, and then maybe we can have an H1, and then from there doing a little check-in, like, are we still not necessarily like you said, Jen, that the plan is wrong, but it's just like, are we still agreeing with what we saw last time that we planned this? Like, have there been any delays? Have there been maybe new shifts in the market or new earnings in the first half a year is what I'm understanding from you too. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
I love to be right. Great. Well, when you are actually building your budget, I think for now 2026, but the budget for the next year, what is the first line item? What is the first thing that goes there?
Natasha, do you want
Oh,
to take this?
wow. Yeah, I'm
Easy
thinking the
questions.
first,
Easy questions.
I, it may seem counterintuitive, but I do think about two things that are often tied for first place. The first one is demand generation, right? So, what do I need to generate? Thinking about the average conversion rates that we may have across the funnel, right? So, what percentage of my leads turn into sales accepted leads, turn into opportunities and pipelines? So, I think from a numbers perspective, what is it that I'm going to need for demand generation? But demand generation can only really be fueled by clarity on the value proposition, ensuring that you have the right materials that are needed from a product marketing perspective, a content marketing perspective. So there's also that product and content piece that is very much tied for first place, if you will. But yeah, those are the two things. And then, yes, I can get more tactical around demand generation. Is it events? Is it some other type of campaigns? But I think of that demand generation bucket first and foremost.
And I have a very similar answer, always solving for pipeline first. So that's the one I need to make sure the pipeline number is going to be covered, and then everything else comes on top of that. And so, and that's, it's also, it's the demand channels, but like the tooling that's required in order to make sure that that's going to come to fruition. So really, solving first for the pipeline number that we need to hit and making sure that those areas are funded enough to get to that number, and then we'll layer on top of that.
And how do you, because I'm assuming that the reason why you're also looking at pipeline numbers, apart from the obvious ones, is also to align to sort of broader company goals. What is your approach on that? I think you touched, both of you, a little bit upon it, that you very much are involved. I think, Natasha, you said you're very much involved with the other functions of the company to make sure that you're all working towards the same goals. But what's your approach when you're looking at these pipeline numbers to make sure that you're also aligning with the roadmap, that you're also aligning with, sales and finance and whatnot?
Go ahead, Natasha.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One word that comes to mind is seasonality, right? So for lots of B2B businesses, and just thinking about the one I work for now, but even prior companies, you'll have, it's not a straight line, right? In terms of buying patterns of our buyers or when they're ready to release budgets to make purchases. And so, yes, we will have a sales number and we know how much pipeline we need in order for that sales number to come to life, and then marketing can run its formulas. We also need to keep in mind that, at least for our business, there's quarters where we're not going to see as much sales coming in because there's seasonality that's impacting the buying behavior of our target ICP. So thinking about that, so that whatever targets I set on a quarterly basis, I'm not setting myself up at a disadvantage by straight lining my target throughout the year, knowing that buying habits and behaviors change based on the quarter. More specifically, here in Europe, the summer months tend to be a slower buying period because lots of our target buyers are on holiday. And so keeping that in mind when we're setting targets is quite important.
Yeah, and I, both in my current role as well as previous companies, have this is a very collaborative exercise. So really working with the FP&A teams, working with your RevOps teams, really like having them help establish what is the target that we need to develop from a pipeline perspective that's going to enable us to hit our ARR targets. That's our Uber number that we're collectively working on. And then we're working across all of the key contributors to that pipeline number. So that's the BDR organization, that's marketing, that's the direct sales organization, that's the partner org. So really collectively, everyone kind of working on, okay, what is achievable within their channel to get to that target. Then we come together and we see where we might have gaps. How do we then make sure that maybe if we feel like if we maybe invest maybe a little bit more on the budget within that quarter, maybe marketing can make up for that gap and maybe one of the other areas, because the headcount planning is going to be a little slower to get started in the first part of the year. Whatever those variables are, like making sure we're coming at it as one team, that we feel good about our collective plan, and then staying in touch throughout the year to make sure we're on track, and then making those adjustments again where needed if things are starting to fall off from some of the assumptions that we had coming into the year.
Natasha, I really like what you said about the thinking about seasonality, right? Like if you're not going to expect a lot of conversations coming in or a lot of busyness in sales in the summer months, then maybe let's save up some of that money also in marketing to other areas, other regions, like other times. If we maybe take it one step further into the actual channels, right? Like paid content events, like I guess pillars of this demand generation machine, as you called it. What are you looking at to inform those decisions when you split the spend between these channels?
And are you asking that in terms of how seasonality or how I think about seasonality when I'm making those
It could
decisions? Or
be. It could also be that you're looking at something else than just seasonality.
yeah, return, right? And speed to return on the investment in those channels. So, for example, in our business, we now know that our event spend, so going to events, great for visibility and awareness. Also, really good, obviously, for demoing our solutions, for having those conversations with our target buyers. But what we have found is that the pipeline and the time to deal closure on a lead that comes from an event takes longer than the time to close on a lead that comes from any digital channel. And yet, in some instances, we find that the average deal size from events differs than the average deal size coming through our digital channels. So now we're looking at how do we optimize our spend, right? And in some instances, we may decide we're going to put a little bit more in events in a certain target country than we might in digital, particularly on paid media spend, or we might reverse that. Or sometimes we take a look quarter by quarter to see where we are. And so I'm thinking constantly about how quickly can I get to some measure of return. And when you have long sales cycles, a measure of return or an interim measure of return is the contribution to pipeline. It is the velocity of how leads are moving through the funnel versus the actual closed one opportunity or the contribution to revenue, because that might happen even outside of the budget year that's in question. So thinking about how quickly I need to generate some returns, knowing that the time to generate those returns can differ based on the channel as well as the average deal size. Those are things that I think about when I'm thinking through optimizing the budget.
Yeah, and similarly, like it goes back to data. So really looking at past performance, really looking at your data of what you're getting from that contribution, and then baking in some assumptions too. So for example, maybe you're going to shift to an inbound SDR team that you didn't have previously. So baking in a little bit of an assumption that you're going to be able to convert a little bit more than what you had been previously. So taking not only past performance, but then also looking at layering in, are there any newer assumptions? Maybe we're starting to see shorter deal cycles because, we're getting more brand awareness or whatever that might be. So taking past historical data and then layering in any newer assumptions, especially like as we're fast growing companies, every year is looking a little different than the previous year. And so baking that in as well.
I wonder because you also said, Jen, that you are right now in the weeds of planning and budgeting for 2026. And both of you have mentioned that there's a lot of moving parts here that you have to take into account. A lot of different dimensions I have to take into account. When do you actually start this planning? Like, I'm just wondering, of course, these are long conversations, it takes a long time. You sit down, you look at the data and everything. But throughout the years, while you're executing on your tactics and your activities, your teams are doing their things, like, do you make like mental notes or do you have like a note bank where you're like, oh, for next year, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, especially as we're coming into the second half planning, usually what happens is we have some thoughts, we have ideas, we have things, and then you're making the trade-offs like this year and second half, or maybe that one gets parking lotted for next year and goes into that planning. So definitely as we're coming into second half planning, that tends to be where we're like making the trade-offs of what's realistic about what we could achieve and then what gets maybe paused and maybe gets layered in for the next planning cycle. So definitely that's a process that I go through pretty regularly. Yeah, I don't know that I have like an actual like document that tracks it all, but there's usually planning documents that we have that then some of those ideas just get paused or put on hold or deprioritized.
Yeah, it's we have quarterly marketing reviews. You might have something similar, Jen. So we're meeting with the sales team. We're talking about here's what we've done over the past quarter, and then here's the look ahead for the next quarter. All of it being part of this annual marketing plan that we've pulled together. And yes, we are still even taking that pause, like we talked about earlier, and thinking through whether we need to do a reset or a slight pivot for the second half of the year. But each time we do these quarterly marketing reviews with the sales teams, that's our moment to also pause and determine if we do need to make a shift, even in the upcoming quarter. And it gives us the opportunity to have more of a real-time collection of notes or trading of ideas and insights. And we're doing that, hearing from the sales teams, getting feedback from them as well as to whether our initiatives are having the impact that we need it to.
I want to, because I guess this question is also a little bit about experimentation versus planning, I guess. Because budgets set the tone. And we talked a little bit about flexibility at the beginning of the session, right? But if there's a line item on a budget and there's a certain amount of funds and investment that has been set to the side, it very much sets the tone of like what we're going to do, right? At least things that we pay for, surely. I went to this event where the CMO of User Centrics gave a keynote, and she spoke about something that we also truly believe here at Dream Data, and it was the 80-20 split. So the 80% of what they do is on things that are proven to work. They know they work, and then the 20% is the experimentation. And user centrics, as they have grown, like first started as an organic thing, and now they're trying to work that 20% into their budgets as well. Do you have any experience in sort of accounting for experiments in your planning and budgeting process?
Yeah, I think, especially in digital channels, that's part of the approach is to make sure that we're always, I mean, that's the primary channel that you really want to make sure you're experimenting. Of course, you want to have your baseline so that you know you have predictable performance, but you need to carve off to try new things. And so, yeah, I think the 80-20. The challenge is sometimes when you have smaller budgets, 20% isn't enough to have a meaningful result to understand if that test is actually performing. So you have to just keep that in mind. Is your experimentation budget enough to give you a result that would indicate whether or not it's working? And so that's just something that you should always think about. If you're spending a small amount and you're not able to actually test it out, you're better off just putting that back into your tried and true things that will perform. And then I think there's just experimentation in general, like more of a philosophy of things that you'll do in marketing. And I'm a huge believer that every quarter we are trying new things, and that many times those things don't require budget. It could be like social, it could be outreach, it could be email tests, it could be, pursuing or doubling down on an ICP, further with enriched experience. So I think that I'm a huge fan of driving test and learn and experimentation. And many times it doesn't require actual budget line items to do that.
That's the same on my side. We don't have a dedicated pot of money for experiments. There's no line item called, our experimentation budget or sub budget. But I do agree with Jen that the spirit and attitude of experimentation and trying new things, even from a marketing operations perspective, right? How can we be more efficient? A lot of those initiatives and ideas don't require a budget, but they do require a growth mindset. They require individuals not being afraid to share ideas and then having the space to actually work through how to implement those ideas. All of that are examples of experimentation that, again, as Jen mentioned, don't cost a thing. And we tried to do those things as well on our side.
I guess you can also experiment within the sort of channels and or activities that do get budget, right? It's not like
Completely.
the line item is like the specific campaign that we will
Yeah.
build in March.
Mhm.
Yeah, completely. You might have a new kind of activation that you do at a third party event, right? But it's already contained within your budget for that event. It's just you're going to try and do some things that are a little bit different.
Yeah. Do you have like a process as well of like you experiment on something, it works. Now we must double down maybe at this like H2 check in or for the next year? Like, how do you decide when an experiment has maybe passed the threshold and it's time to be part of the proven engine, I guess?
Yeah, and I think that's why, planning, you can't just do that annual plan anymore, that things change. And then you also learn about what's working. And then that's where you start to make those adjustments on, maybe you're seeing one channel like significantly outperform. So you're going to shift some of your budget spend over there. And, you have that collective agreement that no one's surprised by that. But I think having your QBRs and other kinds of abilities to do those check-ins, to look at what's working, everyone's on the same page, like, and everyone's bought in that, yep, that's the right thing for us to do based off of what we're seeing.
Yeah. And you can also run experiments in particular markets or countries, right? So if you are a team that is global in nature, but you have some core countries or regions where you want to drive your marketing initiatives, you can pick one that may have lower risk, right? And run an experiment there before just determining if you want to scale it across all of your markets. And we do that as well.
Like a pilot
Yeah.
test.
Yeah, I love that, Natasha. Like, even like owned events, you might try a new format, you might try a new topic, you do it, before you roll it out across all markets, you test it and you kind of like cut your teeth on it and like understand what's working and the value, and then turn it into more of a global repeatable program.
I also really like what you said, Jennifer, about like, yes, there's nothing wrong with having like a budget set out for experimentation. But if the budget is not significant, like why set yourself up for failure? And I think it maybe comes from the fact that marketing, it's no secret, the marketing budgets have been tightening and tightening. So I think marketers were pretty crafty at being like, okay, maybe we experiment with something that is very low cost and then we can show that we can carve some money out of it for next quarter or next year or next half a year or something like that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I wonder, back to both of you actually, when I asked about the first line item in the budget, both of you said that it would be like this demand generation, like pipeline, hard numbers. And at least my LinkedIn feed, the brand versus demand debate is never ending. How do you decide that split between this like brand awareness and demand generation?
I think some of that goes back to those assumptions. So you kind of take your baseline, what's performing, what's working. You bake in some assumption that if we also carve off this amount for awareness, and this is where you could test it in a specific market. If you carve off this amount for awareness, I'm going to expect those other channels to perform better. And then you start to like look at that, and you've got to bring that justification and that belief. And I think there's ways to do it. Like, I use LinkedIn pretty heavily. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of brand efforts come to fruition. But you can run a pilot within a quarter and say, this is how much is going to be for awareness, and then this is going to be demand. And you can then see like those that were provided the awareness advertising, how did that result in more direct response, and what kind of lift. So you can get some baselines and some percentages that then you can apply to your planning and your budgeting.
Yeah, that's great perspective. I struggle these days with carving out very specific, dedicated amounts for brand awareness. Why? Because when you are in an environment where the budgets are tight, expectations are high, we have to do more with less, which is the plight of every marketer, I think, on the planet. We all know that while brand is important, and arguably investment in brand is your most important investment, the time to yield, the time to return is much longer because investment in brand is a long game, but there are ways to get quick wins. What I typically do is find ways to build that brand awareness within my demand generation activities, right? And so if we're going to an event, right, that is a way in which we're raising awareness of the brand. Obviously, by having a booth, you get the eyeballs on it. We get the opportunity to maybe have a speaking slot at that event, which then gives us a chance to talk more about who we are, to talk about our value proposition, to connect with our buyers. Our CEO often says, I really only care about our brand being known by our buyers. The people who we need to know who we are, they're the ones that we want to have that brand awareness with. And it's true. And so I think through what are ways in which I can infuse brand awareness activity, brand credibility activity inside demand generation rather than showcasing that it's a separate budget. You're much more likely to get your budget approved, actually, I think, these days, if you're packaging it as part of an overall demand generation effort.
Yeah, I fully agree, Natasha. It's not a separate line item. Brand is demand and demand is brand. It's overlapping. It's all about the experiences that you're creating and ensuring they're really furthering that association with your brand.
Do you find that it's becoming just based on your closing argument, Natasha? Do you find that this justification on brand investment is getting like either more prevalent than it's been before, or maybe tougher conversation to have that it's been before, or something completely different?
Well, I'm going to be the one to mention the two letters that we have managed to get through half of this time without talking about AI, right? And so, in this world of AI, and we know that AI search summaries, right, are quite popular. We struggle sometimes to make sure we're cutting through the clutter, and lots of people are searching, getting their information using LLMs, etc. And so, brand is even more important, believe it or not, right? And how we talk about our brand online. So, what's our content strategy? Do we have a PR approach? How are we optimizing for SEO on our site? Because we know that these LLMs are crawling the public domain to pull information that we have put out there from a brand and company perspective to then showcase or surface our company, right, in the search results and in the summaries. So that means that we do need to keep investing in brand. But as Jen is saying, it's really trying to do both with a very limited budget, right? Drive brand, drive demand together. I think that when we are able to showcase that doing that investment does have a result, even in the world of AI search, it is probably more likely to get that we can get that investment. So articulating why, again, why brand is important, but how we want to do it so that we have this positive impact, especially in the world of AI. I think that is likely to get marketers some additional budget, or at least preserve budget, because sometimes it's about preserving the budget that you have versus being looking at the possibility of a budget decline, right?
I guess it goes back to that conversation of like, what is brand? Because as you two are saying, like these have to inherently live together. Like you said, Jen, if you go to an event that we have already set budget for, that is a perfect opportunity to do some quote unquote brand activity. So maybe we need to stop LinkedIn. Everyone in my LinkedIn feed needs to stop looking at these two as like two separate conversations and more as like, how do we layer them together?
I completely agree. I mean, brand is everything that we do. If you think about your partner ecosystem, that's brand building, right? You arm your partners with everything they need to represent your company. You give them the tools, the resources, the messaging. That's brand building, right? Like that's brand building. Is it a specific line item in my budget? No, it's called partner marketing, but that's brand building. And so I think brand shows up across all cost centers. It's also like the experience. It's our web development time, because that's important, that experience of what people have and that connection with the brand is what you want to put out there in the market. And so like that's my web development time. That's so the brand shows up across everything that we do in marketing. Yes, is there a line item for a specific brand campaign? That's probably reduced, like we're not making those kinds of investments, but brand is the most important thing for marketers to make sure that we're embracing, that we're keeping an eye on, that we're optimizing for, that we're thinking about in everything that we do across social, across events, across partner, across demand, across everything, across our employee ecosystem, making sure our employees are representatives of the brand, that they've got the message, that they're showing up on social in the right way, that every touch point and every interaction that they have has that brand experience. So brand is everything.
100% agree with that.
I wish I could finish this session with that. That was such a strong way to finish it. But I have more questions. So no. We still have about 10 more minutes. So again, if there's anyone that has any questions, please do shoot. And these brilliant marketers are ready to answer you. If not, I'll just continue. We've been talking about tightening budgets, and let's say that in 2026 they tighten even more. I don't know how that's possible, but let's say that they do. Do you have any sort of idea what are the most, like, I guess, effective, like, levers to pull on or to count on for doing more with less and still meeting the targets that we have to meet?
We have some initiatives right now that we're working on in our planning cycle. One, I mentioned partners. So we're starting to evolve both from like who are our deployment partners to who are our technology partners to who are like just other like tech marketing organizations that we maybe have a connection to that we want to do more co-marketing. So anything that we do with our partners will extend our budget because usually it's co-funding or they're helping to drive registrations or whatever that might be. So we're getting more return for those efforts. So that's a big focus. The other one is customer advocacy. So really arming your customers with the ability to be your spokespeople. And if you look, I mean, I know we look at like how do people find out about Pigment? It's word of mouth. It's, through chats and, chat GPTs and others, and it's from review sites. And so how do you like that's not really a budget line item. That's time, energy, caring about your customers, giving them tools, giving them resources, elevating them so that they can be spokespeople for the company because they're enjoying the experience and they want to tell other peers and other colleagues about what you have to offer.
It's almost like Jen and I are sitting in the same planning sessions. So partner marketing for sure is a lever that we are exploring as we go into 2026. So we've had some collaborations with our partners over this past year, but we're looking to step that up because it really does allow you to stretch your budget, the co-funding, co-promotion of initiatives, even in some instances, joint events together. So that's one. A second for us is taking a look at our content and refreshing, reinvesting in content creation and content marketing. So those would be our top two.
And I will add one more because, yes, Natasha, we have not said those two letters much throughout this event. But AI, we are looking at efficiencies on, to your point, content. Like, how can we use some AI to repurpose, to create derivative content more quickly? So, how do we find some efficiencies with some AI tooling as well?
Yeah, it's crazy that we almost made it into an hour and we haven't discussed AI. This is a first, I think. I guess I want to go back a little bit too. Sorry, I'm not going into AI at all. You're more than welcome to talk about it though. If anyone has AI questions, please do bring them. I'm actually wanting to go back a little bit to this flexibility that we've touched upon. I think that budgets don't always survive first contact with reality. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. How do you build this flexibility into your budgets and into your planning when you have to probably pivot throughout the year?
I can go really quickly. I'm in a very great situation that I'm not tied to a quarterly budget number, which is the first time pretty much in my career that I haven't. So I do have that flexibility to move things across quarters. I know it's difficult when you're tied to a quarterly number and it's like you either spend it or you lose it. I have been in those situations. In those situations, what's really important that at least 6 weeks, if not more, before the end of the quarter, you really are coming together as one marketing team to look across where you might have some underspend or opportunities to invest in maybe another area so that you're not losing that important budget, that budget number. So that's something that not today because I don't have that situation, but previously I've always worked on having that huddle where are we tracking against our budget and where could we maybe invest in some digital optimization because we see some things working, or maybe we are coming in over because you don't want that. Can't lose your reputation with the finance team. Where are we maybe a little hot and where we need to pull back so that we're not coming in over our budget?
I completely echo what Jen has said, especially about the relationship with finance. It is so important as marketers that we build and maintain a really good, open, collaborative, transparent reputation, a relationship with finance. And so going over budget is a no-no, right? For sure. Um, and I also don't have the challenge or opportunity, maybe, of having to stick to a quarterly budget number. I imagine that marketers out there who are in publicly held companies, you probably do have that challenge. So Jen's advice about 6 weeks before the quarter is over, really thinking about the spend optimization, that's super important. So the same, like we can maintain flexibility throughout the year because we're not tied to a quarterly budget. But I do tend to take a look. I do forecast and work on forecasting and connect that to the finance organization. And then as we get to the end of Q3, I look at what is my Q4 forecast spend. So what have I spent so far? Am I severely under budget because maybe things have happened, or maybe we've had some changes in the team, we haven't been able to spend at pace? And how do we make sure that we are using up that budget? Because you also don't want to spend to a lower baseline, right? And then find yourself in a challenging conversation with finance about a new lower baseline for the next year. So I'm also always taking a look at budget and trying to figure out how to optimize it throughout the year.
I wonder, it's for both of you, but specifically, Jen, you mentioned that this is the first time that you're trying, that you're not sort of like set on that quarterly budget. Do you prefer it that way? Are there any cons to that?
It gives more flexibility for sure because things change throughout the year. And as much as you're trying to forecast what your budget should be each quarter, it's hard, or, that event series that you thought was going to run only in Q1, it now crosses over 2 quarters because logistically that made the most sense. So I think it just provides that ability to flex a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay, so you recommend it should be like that.
Yes, it does make my life much easier.
In terms of your relationship with finance, both of you, I think all of us are aligned. We want finance to like us. I mean, who doesn't? But I guess what is better, to be under budget or to be over budget?
To be right on budget.
Exactly. Be right on budget. Yeah.
Hey, you guys are hijacking my question.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
should if I'm gonna be over, like it's the communication, right? So
Yep.
it's making sure you don't close the quarter and finance closes the books and they're like, you were over a lot or you were over. It's just working with finance and making sure if we are going to be over it, because sometimes I have been over and it's been okay. Like it's been clear that we were underspent across the business in other areas and they actually wanted to invest it. They don't want to be underspent. And so they actually want marketing to overspend. So that communication is what's most important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No surprises, right? That's what's critical.
I think that's really important. No surprises. I think sometimes we forget, and this is not only like budget and planning, I think just overall, we think that, oh, we're going to come in and we're just going to say something and like whatever. And then people are like, no, no, no. You should have told me before because there's a lot of other moving parts that I myself need to like think about. Okay, we have a couple minutes left, and I think we should end off with what is the best and worst part of planning and budgeting season for you?
For me, the best part is it's another opportunity to try some new things. It's almost like starting over, right? You have the wisdom and the history of what you've done so far in the year, or even in prior years. You know what works, what doesn't work. So it's a fresh start, almost like New Year's. New Year's is a fresh start for lots of people, right? And I just love the creativity that comes with planning. People really get to bring their best ideas. Of course, you want that creativity all the time, but the planning season is a dedicated time for people to pause, reflect, and create. I'd say that a challenge, I won't call it the worst part, but a challenge is when we don't have the sales numbers locked in, so that you can't do the math to figure out what the demand generation budget really needs to be. And there's lots of reasons why that might take time for sales. If you're an investor-backed company, there's board meetings and all of these other things that come into play before you can get those numbers finalized. And sometimes they shift. And so you have this moving goalpost, right? And having to be super flexible and open, not a bad thing, but a challenge sometimes when you really want to lock things in and even start the preparation, right, in Q4 for your next year, start building things, putting them in place. Sometimes it's hard to do that when you haven't gotten all of your numbers locked in. So that's the challenge, I'd say, for me.
Yeah, I agree with everything Natasha just said. And I think maybe the disappointing or the harder part on this is no one will ever feel like they got enough. So no one's ever, like, I've yet to have a team member say, thank you so much. I can do everything that I wanted now. Like, I've got everything I need. I am good. Like
So
that conversation never happens. It always
Never.
is a little disappointment. I need more to be able to achieve that. And, I think that's the hard part as a CMO is like, you're the one that's going to have to like make the trade-offs and make the call.
Yep.
Like your job also is to like make sure everyone feels like the spirit is one team. And ultimately we are trying to establish and hit our goals as a company. And this is kind of the path forward. And so, yeah, it's always that challenge of like, okay, you got to do more. And here's what you have to work with.
Yes.
And yet we love what we do. So
You do. Well, but I think I like the challenge because I have to say I have benefited at times in my career where there was a lot of budget thrown at things. And I don't think we did our best marketing. I don't think we did. We were rushing to spend the money. And I actually do like challenging us to work within a reasonable budget, a healthy budget, but really push on that and really be smart about how we spend those dollars.
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, okay, maybe there are worse things, but it's at least not pleasant. As someone, obviously, I haven't partaken into the planning and budgeting of marketing budgets, but on the I guess receiving end of being told like we have X amount that needs to be spent by I don't know like a month from now, do something, and then you just come up with like like no one believes in it. It's just like
Swag. Swag.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, I
That is
don't. I
it.
kind of
Extra swag.
yeah, I'm like, "Can you ask someone else?" Like, I don't want my name attached to it. Like, so I hear that. All right. So what we have learned today is planning is important, but flexibility needs to be during planning and also after planning. It does not work in a silo, just like marketing. We cannot work in a silo. We need to make sure that all the moving parts come together and we're all working towards business goals. And do not upset finance. Think those are the main takeaways of today. I want to say thank you so much to Jen and Natasha for joining us. If you want to follow along, please find them on LinkedIn. And if you want to hear more episodes like this is Attributed, a podcast hosted by Dreamdata, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.